In this exchange, Senator Chris Coons raises pointed questions about whether the Justice Department's reform promises match its actions, especially as grants are cut and agents are reassigned. His questioning probes whether public safety and second chance policies are being strengthened or weakened by the administration's current priorities.
One of the challenges federal probation officers face is massive caseloads. And um, I am about to introduce, hopefully reintroduce soon, a bill with Senator Lee that would improve our federal supervised release system by focusing resources on those who really need to be supervised and providing incentives to reduce oversight of those who've really made progress and who've changed the direction of their lives. It is broadly supported by law enforcement and a variety of policy groups. And I'd love to work with you on that, Madam Attorney General.
Yeah, Senator, can I just add, because I just got the numbers. So what we have is $8.7 billion for the Bureau of Prisons. And what that does is it adds 587 correctional officers to help with the things that we just discussed. 95 million for new hires. We have to recruit and we have to retain. We know that's a really tough job to be a corrections officer. And that's why Josh Smith is such a valuable part of that team with Billy Marshall. And I would welcome working with you on that. And President Trump is the one who signed the First Step Act because he believes in second chances. We all do. Thank you, Senator Coons, for that question.
One of the things I have been concerned, even upset about, is how early in this administration, at the behest of DOJ, the department cut hundreds of grants totaling hundreds of millions of dollars, many of which serve critical public safety needs, supporting victims, assisting with reentry, violence prevention, including in my own home state. This was literally defunding the police. And I have some concerns about how DOJ is putting at risk public safety by assigning thousands of agents and prosecutors away from drugs, firearms, corruption, violent crime to help ICE arrest people without criminal records. You've indicated a willingness to review any grant that a member of Congress has concerns about, and noted a number of them have been restored on appeal. And I appreciate that willingness to admit some misjudgments or mistakes in some of the many grants that were canceled. But can you assure us this process is going to be fixed going forward so better decisions are made at the start and not just after appeals? And can you assure us that we are not leaving doors wide open for crime and criminality in our communities and over-focusing on arrest and deportation of those without criminal records?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. And as I said earlier, we are reviewing all the grants, and I believe we have, turned some back on for senators who have called. It doesn't matter what state you're from. If it's a law enforcement grant, if it's protecting victims, let us know and we will work with you. And I'm not sure if we have done any in your state yet, but I would be happy to work with you on that. What I can tell you is there have been, out of the 5,800 discretionary grants that were reviewed, only 376 around the country, 7% were terminated. 225 of the grant recipients have appealed that termination. And so far, we've turned back on 18 of those. 17 appeals have been denied, and the rest are being actively reviewed. If any of you know of any of those that you believe should be turned back on, call me. We don't want to jeopardize anything that's hurting. Please do. Yeah. And Senator, to go to what you said about the FBI and my federal agencies and being pulled to work on immigration cases, they're working hand in hand because we believe that, we have ICE officers out there, as we just discussed. I don't want to repeat that, who are being harmed. We're going to work with them. And I've directed all of my law enforcement agencies to work with ICE to make sure they're safe in Chicago, to make sure they're safe in Memphis, to make sure they're safe right here in Washington, D.C., but also at President Trump's direction. We are not stopping the core function of what we're doing, and that is fighting violent crime. And I think Director Patel made that very clear with all of the arrests that our FBI have been making on violent criminals. And, there's so much that we can't talk about here, but if any of you are on the Intel Committee, we are fighting terrorists around this country every single day. Our lawyers are shut down right now. They're not getting paid, but crime is not stopping. They are working around the clock to not only keep our country safe, Senator, but to keep our world safe.
This exchange between Senator Chris Coons and Attorney General Pam Bondi reflects a rare moment of partial agreement layered with deeper, unresolved tensions about priorities inside the Department of Justice. Senator Coons begins constructively, highlighting a bipartisan effort, alongside Senator Mike Lee, to reform the federal supervised release system. His focus is pragmatic and human-centered. Probation officers are overwhelmed, resources are stretched thin, and the system should concentrate supervision on those who truly pose risks while rewarding people who have genuinely turned their lives around. It's a vision rooted in evidence-based criminal justice reform, one that appeals to both public safety and fairness, and Coons deliberately frames it as broadly supported by law enforcement and policy experts to signal political viability rather than ideology. Attorney General Bondi responds by aligning herself rhetorically with that reform-minded tone, pointing to budget figures, staffing increases in the Bureau of Prisons, and the administration's support for the First Step Act as proof that the department believes in second chances. Her answer emphasizes funding levels, recruitment, and the difficulty of corrections work, projecting managerial competence and institutional commitment. On the surface, this portion of the exchange suggests common ground. Both acknowledge strain on the system, both endorse rehabilitation in principle, and both speak the language of reform. But the tone shifts sharply when Senator Coons raises his deeper concern, one that goes beyond theory and into recent actions. He criticizes the early DOJ-driven cancellation of hundreds of DOJ grants that funded victim services, reentry programs, and violence prevention, calling it literally defunding the police. This is not a rhetorical flourish. It's a direct accusation that budgetary and ideological decisions have undermined public safety on the ground. Coons also challenges the redirection of thousands of federal agents and prosecutors away from drugs, guns, corruption, and violent crime toward immigration enforcement, particularly involving people without criminal records. His question is fundamentally about trade-offs. Whether the administration's enforcement priorities are creating new vulnerabilities in American communities. Bondi's response attempts to reassure without fully conceding the premise of the critique. She emphasizes that only about 7% of discretionary grants were terminated, highlights the appeals process, and notes that some grants have already been restored. Her invitation for senators to call her directly underscores flexibility, but it also subtly reinforces Coons's concern that corrections are happening reactively, after damage is done, rather than through sound decision-making up front. The reliance on appeals as a safeguard raises questions about whether smaller nonprofits or local agencies without political access are being disproportionately harmed. On immigration enforcement, Bondi insists that DOJ agencies are not abandoning their core mission and portrays cooperation with ICE as necessary for officer safety, especially in cities like Chicago and Memphis. Yet this answer largely sidesteps Coons' core worry, whether shifting personnel away from specialized crime-fighting roles weakens long-term enforcement against drugs, firearms, and corruption. Her assurances rest on trust in executive judgment rather than transparent metrics showing that nothing critical is being sacrificed. Overall, the exchange captures a broader fault line in current justice policy. Senator Coons is arguing for consistency. If the administration claims to support public safety, second chances, and evidence-based reform, its budgeting and deployment decisions must reflect those values from the outset. Attorney General Bondi, by contrast, emphasizes control, flexibility, and loyalty to the president's broader agenda, asserting that the department can pursue aggressive immigration enforcement without compromising its traditional responsibilities. The unresolved tension between those positions is the real story of this exchange, and it reflects a Justice Department trying to balance reform rhetoric with enforcement priorities that many lawmakers fear are pulling the system in conflicting directions.